folks, welcome back to the Don's channel. I am the Don Father and I'm about to do a reaction for Dano Walker, who is a veteran of the US Navy. Thanks very much, Dano, for the support and the request. Looking forward to doing it. This video that you've requested is called Cities at Sea, How Aircraft Carriers Work. I'm actually quite looking forward to it because I wouldn't say I'm knowledgeable on it, but I have a rough understanding. And an interesting fact is both sides of my family have both been involved in shipbuilding within the UK, military shipbuilding, aircraft carriers, all sorts of things like that, for generations now. So it's something that comes a long line generationally for me personally. So looking forward to it. The link to the original video will be in the description section below, and if you would like a personalised video request and shout out, please check out our Patreon account, which is also in the description section below, and see the tiers on how to do that. Also, you can join the channel as a member and follow the perks, or just simply subscribe, like, comment and share, and put the bell on so you don't miss any of our future uploads. Anyway, no more talking. Let's go!
This video was made possible by Brilliant. Learn with Brilliant for 20% off by being one of the first 200 to sign up at brilliant.org/wenover. A single aircraft carrier is enough to markedly change the level of a nation's military might. These ships are one of the strongest single assets a military can have. In general, under international law, aircraft carriers can legally position themselves up to 14 miles or 22 kilometers from any country's coast. Clearly, the strategic influence of being able to place a military airbase just miles from any coast in the world is enormous, especially given that 80% of the world's population lives within 60 miles or 100 kilometers from the ocean. While plenty of military vessels are capable of launching helicopters, there are just 19 aircraft carriers worldwide currently in service capable of launching fixed-wing airplanes. China, Thailand, India, Russia, and France each have one, Italy has two, and the US has the 11 largest in the world. These largest carriers require over 6,000 people to operate and often stay deployed for up to a year. They are fully fledged cities at sea. The most advanced aircraft carriers, like the French Navy's Charles de Gaulle, are capable of launching an aircraft every 30 seconds. That means that, for a brief period, when launching aircraft at its maximum rate, the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle becomes busier than Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris.
Oh my good
God.
God.
To be able to achieve such a capability on a moving ship is no easy feat. While the operation of these vessels gives militaries enormous strategic advantage, they also represent one of their greatest operational challenges. An aircraft carrier's offensive weapon is its aircraft. On board, carriers tend to only have a small number of defensive weapons such as surface-to-air missiles and machine guns. But of course, just like any powerful military asset, these carriers are big targets.
Yeah.
It is for this reason that carriers never travel alone while on deployment. While the exact composition can change depending on the mission, the carrier strike groups American carriers travel with are typically made up of a guided missile cruiser equipped with Tomahawk missiles, 2 guided missile destroyers, an attack submarine, and a supply ship. An aircraft carrier is the flagship of this strike group, meaning that, in its command area, it not only has a bridge and an air traffic control center, it also has a flag bridge where an admiral commands the entire strike group. Each of the group's ships serves some combination of offensive and defensive roles. The only exception is the supply ship. Most aircraft carriers don't need regular refueling. All 11 American carriers and the French one are nuclear-powered, meaning they can sail an unlimited distance for 25 years without refueling. Even conventionally powered aircraft carriers like the UK's HMS Queen Elizabeth can travel up to 12,000 miles or 18,000 kilometers without refueling, making the need for stops infrequent. While an American or French carrier could hypothetically sail non-stop for years or even decades, what they can't do is carry enough food, which is always needed, and aviation fuel, which is needed for combat operations, to stay at sea for more than a few weeks at a time. It would be inefficient and place the carriers in a position of vulnerability to have to visit a port every few weeks to restock, especially during combat operations, so they don't. They restock while at sea. The supply ships that move as part of the strike group will sail off to a nearby port to take on fuel, ammunition, food, and mail, sail back to the strike group, then match speed and maneuver alongside the carrier. From there, the two ships will shoot lines across to each other. These lines are used to pull hoses over to the carrier, which are used to transfer aviation fuel. To transfer solid supplies, there are two methods. The first is attaching pallets to dollies that wheel cargo over to the carrier like a zip line. The second method, which is considered simpler yet more dangerous, is using helicopters to pick up pallets from the resupply ship and flying them over to the carrier. These transfers bring both crucial supplies like food and some less crucial items like mail, but this isn't the only way mail arrives on American aircraft carriers. Each carrier actually has a mailing address just like any building in the US. For example, this is the USS Gerald R. Ford address. Families of sailors can send mail to these addresses in the same way that they could to any other, and, in fact, it costs the exact same as a shipment to any other US address, even if the ship is on the other side of the world. Sailors can even order packages online to their ship. Expedited mail often makes it from an address in the US to a carrier sailing somewhere around the world.
Wow, they can actually order things online to their ship. I've noticed Amazon boxes there. That is incredible. That is what blows me away about the United States military. They're levels above everyone else when it comes to these sorts of things. The logistics of the US, how they go about just simple things like, it's not simple things actually, it's one of the most difficult things. Logistics, getting supplies, getting mail, getting food, getting fuel, getting all this. They are on a level above anybody else, make no mistake about that. But to be able to order Amazon to your ship is just different level of insane. Let me tell you something here. These people are at sea. When you go to sea, you think to yourself, right, I'm going to have to do away with certain luxuries, you know what I mean? Ordering from Amazon would have been one of the things I would have thought would have been a no-brainer. You wouldn't have been doing it, you know what I mean? You wait till you get home and you'll get that, anything you want, you'll spend your money that you've not been able to spend at sea. You'll be able to spend it when you get home and get the things that you think you want. When you're a year away from home, you're thinking, I wouldn't mind buying that with some of my money that I've earned here when I've been at sea. No, you don't need to worry about that. You can spend your money, they're possibly even getting Wi-Fi there off the ship, and ordering online individually. Boom, I'd like that off Amazon. I don't know, I want to buy a yoga mat. I want to buy a yoga mat. Get a yoga mat delivered to your ship. Absolutely incredible.
In just 10 days. Having this speed requires more frequent deliveries than those of the logistics ships, but conveniently, carriers are airports at sea. American carriers currently use a fleet of C-2 Greyhounds as cargo aircraft, providing a high-frequency, often daily connection between carriers and shore. When cruising in the South China Sea, for example, as the USS Ronald Reagan did in November 2018, mail might be sent to Singapore via conventional means. A C-2 Greyhound would then fly from the ship to Singapore, pick up the mail, and fly back to the ship. As carriers sail around the world, the pickup points of the C-2 Greyhounds are continuously shifted to nearby friendly nations. While mail does wonders for increasing crew morale, that's actually the lowest priority cargo for the C-2 Greyhounds. The aircraft are integral for bringing on spare parts for all the carrier's aircraft and transporting VIPs, press, and other individuals to and from the carriers. The C-2 Greyhound is about the same size as an Embraer 145, a civilian aircraft capable of carrying 50 people, so it's not tiny. The longest aircraft carrier in the world, which also happens to be the newest, is the USS Gerald R. Ford, but even she is only 1,106 feet or 337 meters long. With commercial airports, a runway of 5,000 feet or 1,500 meters, like the one at London City Airport in London, is considered short, while large airports like London Heathrow will have runways longer than 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters. So how do C-2 Greyhounds and other aircraft on carriers deal with having runways of only 1,100 feet or 330 meters long? They don't. They take off with just 325 feet or 99 meters of space. All US and French carriers use a system of catapults to get aircraft up to takeoff speed within 3 to 4 seconds. This allows these carriers to launch a decently sized aircraft like the C-2 Greyhound with their relatively short decks. Other carriers, like the Chinese and Indian ones, don't have catapults, so they can only launch lighter, shorter-range aircraft capable of taking off with a very short runway. Both these two types of carriers have arrestor wires that aircraft catch on landing to decelerate with a short distance given. Every other aircraft carrier out there can only operate with aircraft capable of vertical landing. What takes place on the flight deck is carefully choreographed chaos. On American carriers, everyone's job is easily identifiable by the color shirt they wear. Yellow shirts deal with navigating aircraft around the deck. Blue shirts are assistants to yellow shirts driving tugs, operating elevators, delivering messages, and more. Red shirts do all the handling and mounting of ammunition. Purple shirts manage aircraft fueling. Green shirts are worn by a few different groups including catapult crews, maintenance personnel, cargo handlers, and more. White shirts are also worn by a mix of personnel including those helping aircraft land, working as medical personnel, and more. And lastly, brown shirts are worn by plane captains, who are not those that fly the aircraft. They're individually in charge of overseeing all work for getting an aircraft ready for flight. The flight deck is a dangerous place given its small size. It's so small that all the carriers...
Okay, so I was just thinking there, this is for basic stuff for going around the world, maybe a year at sea, going around, and obviously they're linking into, well, friendly to the US ports, getting their mail, getting their refueling, bringing on visitors, etc. And they're talking about the mayhem then, so there's a colour-coded system for each and every individual job that they have on the aircraft carrier itself. Obviously very important, everybody knows where and what is happening at each particular time, so the colour-coded system is quite simplistic and easy to understand. If you're aware of the colour system, you'll be aware of what that person's doing at a particular time, and it keeps everybody from being in a panic when things are happening. And this is just in normal time. Could you imagine this in a wartime situation? If there was no colour-coded system, it would be mayhem. Aircrafts going up and down, constantly coming in and out, in and out. Some of them maybe beat up or whatever. It would be carnage. So you would need something like this, a simplistic system, in order to reduce the level of chaos, if you can, in a serious wartime situation. But to keep it more controlled, if you like. Brilliant.
Aircraft can't fit on it, but of course just below the flight deck is the hangar. A large carrier can carry up to 100 aircraft, so massive elevators bring aircraft from the flight deck to the hangar for storage when not in use. About 6,000 people work and live aboard each American carrier. 3,200 of them have jobs related to running the ship itself. That includes everything from working in the engine room, maintaining the nuclear reactor, cleaning the decks, to actually working up in the bridge commanding the ship. Many of these jobs are below deck, and since all the above deck space is used for flight operations, many on board can go weeks without seeing sunlight. 2,500 other personnel are part of the carrier's air wing. If this was an airbase on land, these would be everyone working there, including air traffic controllers, aircraft mechanics, fuelers, pilots, and more. The few hundred remaining personnel work assorted other jobs. In terms of personal space, enlisted personnel, the vast majority of those on board, only get a single bunk in a room with sometimes more than 100 others. Higher-ranked individuals, though, of course have more spacious accommodations. As long-term homes for thousands of people, these ships also have a few small luxuries like stores, gyms, barbershops, lounges, and more, but space is at a premium when 6,000 people are packed into one floating hall, and the mission is paramount. Since their heyday in World War II, some have started to question the place aircraft carriers have in modern warfare. Every operating country aside from the US tend to, at any given moment, have their ships either in combat, in training, or at home. The US tends to use its carriers for a fourth function: power projection. At any given moment, there is almost certainly an American carrier cruising somewhere in the world. In fact, January 2017 was the first time since World War II that there was not an American aircraft carrier on deployment. Even if there wasn't an aircraft carrier on deployment, they're fast. They have a top speed of 35 miles or 56 kilometers per hour, meaning that a Norfolk, Virginia-based carrier could get to the Middle East in just a week. In the Pacific, the US has an even greater advantage since it has the USS Ronald Reagan based in Yokosuka, Japan, from where it could reach the shores of North Korea, for example, in just 29 hours. American carriers spend plenty of time just cruising around the world's oceans, reminding other countries of the US's military power. For example, the USS Ronald Reagan returned from a 4-month deployment from August to December 2018, during which it saw zero combat. It spent much of the time cruising around the South China Sea, an area in which China is attempting to assert military control, much to the US's displeasure. Elsewhere in Asia, American carriers also regularly make visits to the Korean peninsula to remind North Korea of their presence. This reached a peak in November 2017 as tensions with North Korea reached a peak when 3 American carriers loomed near Korean shores. With their enormous power, though, aircraft carriers represent an enormous target, especially in the era of stealthy drones and precise missiles. The sinking of a single US aircraft carrier could result in more American military deaths than the entire Iraq War, in addition to the loss of tens of billions of dollars in military assets. While no aircraft carrier of
my
any
word.
nation has been sunk since World War II, it's potentially more possible than one would think. US carriers regularly participate in war games where combat conditions are simulated with allies. There have been two concerning incidents in 2005 and 2015 where Swedish and French submarines, respectively, have won the games against US carriers. What this means is that the two countries' submarines approached close enough to the carriers where they could have, if they were an enemy in real combat, launched torpedoes and potentially sank the carriers. This, in essence, proves that aircraft carriers, with all their defense, are not as unsinkable as some may say. Meanwhile, the US has already received the first of 10 in a new class of carriers, while China, India, and the UK each have carriers under construction, so, despite their possible obsolescence, we can be sure that the aircraft carrier won't be leaving the world's oceans anytime soon.
Well, that's the end of the video. Very interesting, very felt packed full of information there. I enjoyed it a lot, actually. I mean, there's a lot of it I would have kind of thought anyway. I think when you've either been on the ships or on any naval ships, they work and operate in kind of a similar fashion. So quite a lot of it would have been sort of familiar to me in certain respects. Also, where I grew up would have been, I've always lived in a shipbuilding town, and I've always been around people that talk about it or work in the dockyard, work shipbuilding or whatever, so you're quite, you have quite a bit of knowledge on it anyway. And what I would say about the aircraft carrier, well, actually, I think the UK, I think it said one there, but I think they're building 2 new aircraft carriers in Rosyth, to my knowledge, in Rosyth Dockyard in Fife, Scotland. I think that is the case. I'm possibly wrong, but I've not been living there for a while now, but I think I read a story that they were building 2 aircraft carriers there in Rosyth Dockyard. They've got a contract to do that, so that's quite good. In regards to the question, or the statement, should they be obsolete, should they not be in commission anymore, the aircraft carrier? Well, they absolutely should, because let's just talk about it on a US side of things. The most powerful air force in the world, from what I've learned this last wee while, is of course the US Air Force. That would be straight away, you would know that. But a lot of people wouldn't realise that the US Navy is the second most powerful. So there is a huge demand for these aircraft carriers, and it's absolutely no surprise to me the number of aircraft carriers the US have, given the might of the US Navy Air Force. But should they still be commissioning them? Should they still be making them? Well, I think yeah. And I will say, well, not only does it employ a lot of people and give a lot of people jobs, that's something that always gets overlooked when you say, let's just get rid of these. This isn't moral anymore. We shouldn't be building these things anymore. I hear a lot of that, particularly in Scotland, where there's nuclear subs stored, and there's a whole lot of outcry about, we don't want nuclear subs in Scotland. What a nonsense. It implies an awful lot of people, so to overlook that and say we don't want these anymore, move them away or get rid of them, it's an absolute nonsense. There's lots of people that rely on employment in those local areas, so there's a lot of people employed. But these are actually cities at sea. How many people did it say is employed in these aircraft carriers? The formation in itself is understandable. Of course, they're just a big sitting target, aren't they? They wouldn't be as much of a target in wartime situation, because there would be aircrafts coming off it, lots of fighter jets in the sky ready to shoot anything that bloody moved or was a direct threat to the aircraft carrier. But it's surrounded in formation anyway in order to keep it relatively safe, even given they said the French and the Swedish managed to get into firing range on the US Navy's aircraft carrier. I wouldn't worry about that necessarily, because it would never pan out that way. I think you would see, if there was in a wartime situation, you would see a hell of a lot more US nuclear subs. There'd be a lot more battleships in the area. I would imagine that something like that would probably be sitting further back and they would be setting the jets off just from a safer distance where they could go in and engage the enemy. I think they're just absolutely incredible, to tell you the truth. The stats on it alone are incredible. The length of the runway, how they use the catapult system to get the aircrafts up, how they actually even store the aircrafts in like underground underground, but under the runway level. Sorry, you're going down a deck, aren't you? So they're storing them in a hangar under that. From the cooks, where they work, all the different jobs working below deck, not seeing daylight. I think it's quite fascinating. I think you associate not seeing daylight more with sub workers, don't you? The submarines, not necessarily people on ships, but that seems to be the case on these aircraft carriers. I like the colour-coded system, simplistic. But these things are absolutely incredible. Really appreciate the request of that, because I've learned actually quite a bit as well, and it's quite fascinating. Given actually, just in the sense that the military might of the US on that one is actually, people say, why does the US need so much? Why are they hell bent on buying more and more and more? Well, my simple answer to that question, I think we have. I mean, I wouldn't sit here and say the world is at peace. Of course, we've got conflicts around the world. We've had conflicts for over the decades. Every decade there seems to be another conflict breaking out, and maybe the need for a bit of peacekeeping going on by Western governments. We've had the Western countries at war in the Middle East, and as you go further back than that again, there's been wars. But in terms of world war size fighting, we've not seen anything like that, thank God. But I think it's essential to have these deployed around the world all the time to deter the threat of violence, the threat of war. What would the South China Sea be like if the US never had these aircraft carriers or possibly subs deployed? You'll never hear about that, but I'd imagine the US has nuclear subs within the area all the time. All the time. What would it be like in the South China Sea, for example? The Chinese would be trying to expand their territory. We're already seeing it in places like Taiwan, where they're trying to push them out. Hong Kong, of course, the people there are in a bad position right now as well. So what would it be like for these people, these countries, these states, if the US never had a presence? Would there be more liberties getting took from the Chinese? I would imagine there would be. I can't say that for a fact, but it deters. Sometimes having a presence at sea, a visible presence, is enough to, right, we better not do that. We better not do that. Look what's sat over there. Because they're very, very close to, by law they're legally allowed to be very, very close to a country's coastline, which wouldn't leave you too far away from major cities at the end of the day. So just like that, they could deploy those aircraft carrier, the aircrafts off the aircraft carrier and hit targets within, I'd imagine, what would be pretty rapid time. So brilliant video. Thanks very much for the request, Dano. Greatly appreciated. Respect to you for your service within the US Navy, brother. And if anybody else would like a personalised video and request, please check out our Patreon account in the description section below, or simply join the channel as a member, where you can put your requests through that way as well. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share, and also follow us on, subscribe to us on Rumble, I should say rather, and put the boxing gloves on the videos on Rumble, as that's the equivalent to liking on YouTube. Thank you very much. That's everything. I'll see you all soon, everyone.